Hello and welcome to week 6. I can't believe we're already here. This is a real shift in our last 2 weeks of the course where we move from the big macro of looking at kind of the big picture, right? Our content goals, the big goals that we want our learners to walk away really understanding, to how are we going to get them there? So the micro, the actual lesson approaches and designs that will incorporate, and as always, beginning with our learners in mind. So who they are, what motivates them, what challenges them, and we will then design instructions around that to get them to where we need them to be. So in this week, you'll be doing a reflective forum, really looking at different instructional strategies, different models of instruction or teaching that can be used and transformed. So again, it's a K-12 focused textbook, but it's really a cradle to career transferable skills. So everything, that's why I love this book, is it's probably the most user-friendly and gives us really good tools immediately to take and use for our own learners. So that's what the first one is. How are you gonna take this and transform this to increase the relevance and meet the needs of your learners? Again, going back to our profile of who our learners are, really keeping that in mind. The practice assignment is in a sense twofold. One, and we'll be going some lecture more further on how do you write an effective learning objective that really supports your learners to meet your learning goals. And then what's the best tools, strategies to actually help your learners meet that learning objective. So it's all about alignment, right? We're going to, how do we help them meet those learning goals of our instructional designs by making really concrete learning objectives to help them get there, and then finding the best strategies, best instructional tools and models that align to that objective to help our learners get there. So in this week, there'll be some readings. There's a writing on developmentally sound learning objectives, and that's going to be getting into Bloom's taxonomy, levels of thinking, higher order thinking, lower order thinking, and how we scaffold our learners. Part 2 of this textbook really gives us so many different tools that for your toolbox, and hopefully it's one that you'll keep on your shelves or bookshelves or whatever, wherever they might be. But Appendix D is really almost a table of contents with some really good graphics on helping you pause and know which instructional models you want to dig deeper in. So this reading is different in that it's not really reading like we have in the past and a lot of different content, but it's different instructional tools. So the reading will look different. It's much more of a review of resources for you to really pick and choose. The class reflection discussion is going to ask you to really look at the learning models in terms of supporting relevance. And then our practice assignment, you will actually be developing learning objectives and picking the best instructional strategies. And I'll be getting to all of that in just a moment. But first, I want to take a little bit of time to unpack some of the content in terms of how to write learning objectives. So in this overview, I want to start with really Bloom's taxonomy. And hopefully, if you haven't heard about Bloom's taxonomy, you're going to love it. And if you have, you'll know that there's many different versions out there in terms of the names, sometimes in this hierarchy of thinking. And it may start with the foundation of kind of remember. It used to be called recall or knowledge. So the names may have slightly shifted, but what they represent are the same. And so this particular iteration really looks at building blocks into the higher level thinking. So our lower level thinking, in education, we love our acronyms. So you may have heard the term a lot. So look for lower level thinking. Or lower order thinking, lots. And that would be really starting off with what are the basic facts that we want our students to know, right? And then how do we get to more complex thinking where we ask them to, use those facts for more to be able to explain or discuss or engage in. And then again, another level up is that we have them use that information, actually apply it to and interpret or demonstrate. So you can see that the type of thinking we're asking learners to do becomes more sophisticated and actually builds on each other until we get into HOTS or higher order thinking, which is getting into where we start to analyze or synthesize, evaluate. So we take things apart in order to put them back together, right, in new and creative ways. So there is a reading short assignment called Writing Developmentally Sound Learning Objectives that will dig into this a little bit more, and it'll give you a good foundation if this is new for you. And when we think about how do we use Bloom's really in thinking through our instructional designs and our assessment plans. So one is I've never met any instructor that has ever said, gosh, I'm against higher order thinking. I don't want my learners to think critically. The challenge is, how do we help them do that? So Bloom's is a wonderful tool, kind of a mirror for ourselves to ask ourselves, am I providing my learners with the opportunity to do higher order thinking skills? How do I support HOTS here? It also helps us think of how we're going to scaffold for our students. So how do we help build on the known? We don't want to give our students an unknown foundation of something they really don't know and understand and ask them to build on that. So thinking of this as building blocks, how do we provide them with the foundational knowledge, the bottom level of the facts and concepts for them to then build on so that they can then get into a more higher order thinking. So we would probably, as we think about our instruction, we need to think about how we support that. And then good instruction and assessment, we know it's related and support. So we assess what we teach, and we have intention in where we want our students to walk away with, right? What do we want our students to know and be able to do? And at these different levels, how do we check in with our students along the way? The last is it allows us to really think about our instruction and assessment in a way that allows our learners to really show us what they know and what they can do. So it gives us, there's more intentionality. So again, more of this is going to be in your reading. I just wanted to kind of mention it before we get into the next piece, and that is the task of writing observable learning objectives. And so I want to start by saying they're different than enduring understandings. Enduring understandings, the macro, and learning objectives is our micro. So what's the difference between the two? Well, enduring understandings, right, are these large general statements about the big ideas of our topic or content and what knowledge, skills, dispositions, values are really most important. This is what we want our learners to walk away with understanding, that essential understanding at the end of our instruction, whether it be a unit or a workshop. Whereas lesson objectives, these are really concise statements that describe a learning outcome. So objectives describe really what we want our learners to, where we want them to go, not how we're going to get there, right? It's what we want our learners to learn, but not how they're going to do it. So a well-written objective really helps us as instructors clarify really specifically what we want our learners to learn. It helps provide that focus and direction and really guide that selection of appropriate practices. So a written objective, those are vital. They're the core, they're the heart of our instructional design because they provide that roadmap for really designing and delivering our curriculum. throughout our design and development that we've done so far, we can compare kind of the content to be delivered is really made up of these objectives that we've identified. So this process, this performance agreement, it ensures that that final product, that the end result meets the goals that we've identified. So our objectives really are the many pieces of that build up and help our students meet those enduring understandings. So what is a learning objective? Okay, so a really well-written one. And we're going to practice kind of almost we're going to analyze it, take it apart in order to put it back together. So let's start off with, what do we want our learning objectives to be? First of all, they describe the learning outcome, not the activity or the assignment. It's all about the learning. It helps provide, really clarify what the learners will learn. It's very clean. It's one sentence. There's nothing really creative. It's almost formulaic here, friends. And they're measurable and they're observable. So those of you that have a grant writing background, this is going to be super easy for you. If we think about it in results, clearly written and very specific. Right? One sentence. It communicates successful learning in behavioral terms, and it's really written in terms of performance. So in a learning objective, there are 4 components that you want to make sure you can identify and you pull from when you write your learning objectives for this week's practice, and for all learning objectives. One is the content. You have to be really clear the content. So this is your subject matter. If you have, if you have standards, this is the language right out of the standards, right? Or if you have professional learning goals, this is the language. So this is what they're actually learning. Then there's the behavior. And this is that observable behavior. So it's actually what the learners are going to do, not what you're going to do as the instructor, but actually what your learners do. That's the action verb. And this, my friends, goes right back to Bloom's taxonomy. So all of these action verbs, so your learners are going to do things like compare or contrast. They're going to select. They may discuss or describe. So these are the action verbs, and there's a number of them that I'll be sharing with you when you get to the reading. And then the conditions. So this is the content, the subject matter, the what are they going to learn? The behavior is what are they going to do? The condition is that circumstance, the situation, or the setting. So kind of like, where are they going to do it, or what are they going to need to do it, right? So it's kind of I'll give you some more examples as we get going, but this may be something that they will, for example, do something in a class discussion, or they may be using resources or tools, much like some of those great resources that you described last week in the technology. And then the fourth one, the degree of criteria, is that level of acceptable performances. You can think about this as, how would I grade these, or how will I know if a student actually walked away and was successful in meeting the learning objectives. So let's look at an example here. Let's take a real simple